welcome. You're listening to I Wanna Believe Radio. Right here, powered by Liveradio1 on the Paranormal Now Network. And here's your hosts, Dan Holroyd, Bob Penny, and Elmer Moster. I Wanna Believe.
Hello, all right, you're listening to I Wanna Believe Talk Radio on the Paranormal Now Talk Radio Network. We are also featured on 89.9 WKDS here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And we are featured, well, of course, you can go to the Paranormal Now website, which is para-now.com.
You had to remember that? You were lost for a second there.
I was lost for a second. I think I'm just getting old and getting...
Yeah, powered by Liveradio1 and...
CRS moments.
Yep.
Yes, Liveradio1's the mothership.
CRS moments. We'll have to do a commercial for that.
Those CRS moments.
Also broadcast, here locally on WKDS 89.9 FM Kalamazoo. And on our YouTube channel, which you go to YouTube and type in Paranormal Now Network, that'll take you over and you'll see some of our latest interviews with a little fireside video added to it or just a still. I know that today I was finally able to get the interview we did with Daryl Weissman of Post Town. I've been struggling with that, and Jerry Jodlowski as well from How to Halloween. And, of course, we have a guest on tonight, and once we get this one done, we'll have this one available on those places as well.
That's right, guys. The Paranormal Now Network features all kinds of different podcasts and videocasts as well. We've got the Reel Deels, Kenneth and Fair Rose Deal. They are a demonology couple, and they've got a wonderful show. It's a live studio video, and they're actually going to be going live on the network, I think, here pretty soon. We're still working out some of the broadcasting, but they've got their old shows, and they are currently still doing some shows that we are running on their page. We also have Deb and RJ DeRoos, Mystical Awakenings Radio, which we've got their content on there as well, and they are also going to be broadcasting a live video podcast feed as well. And then we have famed psychic medium Patty Negree and radio host Sheena Metal with their shows, Haunted Playground. And we also have their shows on their page, but they will also be doing a live, I believe, video podcast as well on our network.
Eventually.
So
I think eventually.
I know they've been really busy, so
yeah,
we're getting things kind of up and running here, and pretty soon we've got the live features. We've got the chat box in there, so you can talk to them and chat with them, and just have a fun time with it.
And real quick, our hearts and our prayers and good vibes go out to Deb DeRoos and her family. I know they were struggling with a little bit of hardship with RJ's brother, and heard from Deb the other day and said that they're getting things in order and they'll be back with us very soon. So we wanted to let them know we're thinking about them.
Yep, definitely.
All right, man.
Anyways, let's get on with the show.
Yes.
Man.
That's why I came here, Bob.
It's funny because Dan brought this old comic. It's an old Lost in Space comic.
The Robinson family.
It's called the Robinson family,
yep.
Lost in Space. And
yep.
it's basically what they based the Lost in Space series from, is this little comic here. And so we've got a little bit of sci-fi theme. We're looking down in the studio. I've got a I Wanna Believe poster, the kind that Fox Mulder had in his office.
And right in front of you have
a Ouija board hanging up on the wall. We've got some Star Trek posters in the studio.
Yeah.
Man, we are all decked out with all kinds of fandom down here.
And, of course, this awesome guest that's waiting on us
awesome
to stop talking.
Guest, I mean, it just goes with the atmosphere.
Right.
We're just going to burn a candle here, turn off the lights, and I tell you what, man.
You get touchy-feely.
We've got the one and only Andrew Smith. He is the Braxton County Visitor Center Director right there in Braxton County, West Virginia, which is home to the infamous Flatwoods monster sightings, which started back in the 1950s. And actually, they did a documentary recently, Small Town Monsters. Seth Breedlove, our friend, did a documentary on the Flatwoods Monster, which, featured Andrew. And I heard that the premiere back in April was just through the roof. I mean, they had to turn people away from the premiere of the show.
I've seen a couple other short ones done as well on YouTube. So I've actually just recently, when you said we were having Andrew on, I had just seen one of those. It was kind of serendipitous, really strange, and I was really intrigued by the boys and the family's account and other witnesses. But we're going to let him tell that story as we get into this. But,
Andrew, welcome to the show. Welcome to I Want to Believe Radio.
Welcome, Andrew.
Well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, hey, it's great having you on here. We're just excited to kind of delve into the legend and to your neck of the woods here in the Flatwoods Monster. I mean, many of us have heard of the Flatwoods Monster, and then there's many of us who haven't heard of the Flatwoods Monster. I guess let's start out a little bit about, let's go into your background a little bit. I know that you are the director of the Visitors Center there in Braxton County. Let's maybe talk a little bit about how you kind of got involved with this.
Okay. Well, about 5 years ago or so, actually a little bit longer than 5 years now, whenever me and my then girlfriend decided to get married, she already lived in Braxton County, and I lived one county over in West Virginia, and she was more rooted here than I was, so I packed up where I was living and moved in with her, and then a person she knows in the community that was on the board of directors at the time, they knew they were going to be looking for a new, somebody else to take over the helm, and he knew that I was looking for a job, so when we come in and interview, so I did, and ended up getting the job, and been there ever since. I absolutely love it. My organization does a whole lot of things, but, kind of one of the main things right now is we operate and curate the Flatwoods Monster Museum. We've kind of been doing some form of that for about 2 years or so, but we recently moved locations, and that afforded us the option of having much more space. And because of that, we really just, decided to really develop it further and make it a full-fledged museum. So we've been operating the way we are now since last October, and it's just been crazy ever since. I'm amazed at the amount of yeah.
Well, that's great. And like I said, I'd mentioned about Seth Breedlove recently doing the Small Town Monsters documentary regarding the Flatwoods Monster there in Braxton County. What was that like, working with Seth?
That was great. He got a hold of me. I'm wanting to say, it was definitely sometime last year, but it must have been later in the year. And more or less, he was kind of on the trail for, hunting up some artifacts to use in this film, hunting up some witnesses to be interviewed, and that sort of thing. And since we kind of already had our finger on the pulse of the Flatwoods Monster, and what kind of makes it a little difficult is there's really not a whole lot of story there. So to dig up usable material for somebody like him is actually it's quite difficult. But we managed to dig up enough for him to get started. It just so happened that my neighbor where I live now is Freddie May, who is one of the May boys, who was a witness.
Right. Oh, wow. Wow.
And he actually has been refusing interviews for a long time, but it just so happened one day Seth and his crew were in filming, and my wife had called me and told me that Fred was home, which he hasn't been home a lot here in the last 2 or 3 years. So I thought, well, shoot, come up and say hi. Maybe he'll like you, and maybe he'll let you interview him. And they ended up sitting on Fred's porch for about 2 hours or so while they were getting to know each other. And by the end of it, Freddie decided that he would let Seth interview him. So that ended up taking his documentary to a whole new level.
Oh, yes, definitely.
And Freddie ended up convincing his brother, Eddie May, who was one of the boys too, who had never been interviewed. He had never been interviewed about the Flatwoods Monster. So Seth interviewed him as well. And they're both featured in the new documentary. That's
great. Yeah, so that worked out well. I mean, so are you pretty close with Freddie? I mean, being a neighbor and all? I mean, do you...
Well, it's actually funny, not really. And that's only because we moved into the house that we're in now maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And right at the beginning, or pretty recently after we moved in, he and his wife were actually out of town almost all the time.
Right.
Because his wife actually had fell ill, and she was receiving medical treatment outside the area. So we would see him on an odd weekend or on an odd couple days.
Right.
And the bulk of the conversations that I've had with Freddie have been about, our lawns. They've been about the weather.
Right. Just
they've been
regular chit-chat, neighbor stuff.
And I would try every now and again to talk about the monster with him, but I could tell while I was talking to him it was something that, even to me, it was exciting and interesting that I was talking to this guy who experienced it, 65 years ago. I could tell he was done talking about it.
Right.
He would much rather talk about his lawn than the monster. So usually we would have about 2-hour-long conversations that would mostly consist of lawn talk and weather. But he gave a great interview for Seth, and he talked all about what he experienced, and it was a great interview.
That's great, yeah, and I just want to recommend to all the listeners out there. So if you guys are just stumbling across our show, you're listening to I Want to Believe Radio, and we are talking to Andrew Smith about the Flatwoods Monster, and he runs essentially a monster museum that pretty much surrounds the Flatwoods monster legend there in Braxton County, West Virginia. And he's talking about a little bit about the documentary that they did for Small Town Monsters. And his neighbor is actually, one of the original witnesses, one of the boys that actually witnessed the Flatwoods Monster. So it's really incredible. So I guess let's kind of dive into what is the Flatwoods Monster? What is this legend? How did it begin?
Okay. Well, and on September 12th, 1952, there were several boys on a playground in Flatwoods, and like playing football, and it was in the evening, and while they were playing, they see this light come across the sky and inexplicably seem to slow down, maybe stop and land on what looked like seemed like a nearby hilltop. So, because they saw this thing, that didn't make any sense to them, they just immediately ran right toward it to go check it out.
Yeah.
And on their way, Freddie and Eddie, who I talked about earlier, was their home, and their mother was home, so they ran in, told their mother what they were doing, what they saw, and her name was Kathleen May, and then at the time there was also a cousin of theirs visiting, who was as the boys ran up the hill and stopped at the May home. They stopped and got their mother, Kathleen May, and I believe it was either a cousin or a distant cousin that was staying there at the time, who was back from Army boot camp.
Right.
And so they, yeah, okay. And they were so they trekked on up the hill, and as they were approaching the hill, it was already about dusk. It was already after 7 when they saw the thing come over. So as they're going up the hill, it's getting dark. And I believe the way that I understand it best is kind of getting close to the hilltop off to the right, they could see this, ball or some sort of orb shape that was, red and pulsing and glowing. Yeah. And that's what they were more concentrating on. And then, they could hear noise coming from their left into the woods. So as they all turned their flashlights that way to look at it, something, is looming over them, between 10 and 15 feet tall. It kind of depends on the descriptions that you read. Unexplainable what they see, something they've never seen before. In some testimonies, it's this, grotesque, lizardy, otherworldly being. Yeah. Sometimes it's kind of like a robot. It's kind of hard to say, and they didn't look at it for very long because as soon as they saw it, they turned tail and were running down the hill to get away from it. So that's more or less kind of the root of the story. But to me, what really gets fascinating about it is because up till this point, there had really not been too many, alien encounter type stories, especially that involve so many people, and especially involving women and children. It kind of gripped the nation for a little while. And it was several years after Roswell, maybe 2 or 3 years after Roswell, but really between those two events, there really weren't too many notable sightings. So that kind of propelled it into this national and maybe even international headlines there for a little while. And then in the years since, there's been several reports that have come out that didn't get near the amount of attention at the time, and it was on purpose. The people that saw what they saw, chose to stay quiet about it. But there ended up coming to light this story that's very eerily similar that took place, a week or two prior, about 15 miles north of Flatwoods. And then, of course, there's the now, fairly well-known incident that happened in Frametown, which is about 20 miles south of a couple traveling and breaking down alongside the road and seeing this something that pretty well matched the same description. Yeah. So that's pretty much it.
Subsequently, as you had talked about just this a little bit ago, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I'm making notes as you go because I remember seeing, reading up on this and also seeing a few short documentaries put together by people who visited, or I haven't seen Seth's, film yet. But weren't there strange lights and things that had been reported in that area before the monster was seen? That military and other people in that area were kind of noting and keeping track
investigating
of before all this happened?
I think I heard you right. What I think you were talking about was, did you say something about that there were lights seen in the area, like in the sky, that preceded the September 12th incident?
I remember something
okay.
You mentioned about that. Right.
I don't know. That actually isn't something that I'm familiar with, but it's also something that I wouldn't doubt.
Yeah.
But no, I don't really know a lot about it.
Yeah, they were trying to make a connection, so I wasn't sure if you guys, that's something new, or that's just something maybe, again, with some of these people that put these together, you never know what information, where it's being gathered and what's being added to it. So.
Well, the thing is, it's like in the 50s and the 60s, West Virginia was in a hot spot for UFO activity from 1966 to 67 during the Mothman sightings. Was the highest UFO counts in West Virginia, but in the 50s it was a lot of UFO activity, especially in West Virginia, Washington D.C. There was sightings. That's the reason why some people try to make a correlation with the Braxton County monster and UFOs, because of the simple fact.
Right.
Andrew, I just had a question for you. I know back in the early 2000s, UFO Hunters was out there, and they had talked about the area still being radioactive. Do you know anything about that at all?
No, I don't. I'd never heard that before. And I'll be honest, I hope that it's not, because I had visited the location once, so I hope that my cells weren't altered or anything like that, my DNA. But no, but to be honest, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Because what's funny? What I've noticed about Flatwoods Monster stuff is, especially when it comes to like TV shows that's been made and like short videos that people have made and that sort of thing, it seems like the stuff involving the Flatwoods Monster kind of comes and goes. Like, even now, if I do like a Google search about the Flatwoods Monster or Phantom of Flatwoods or Braxton County Monster or any of its, number of names, the most stuff that comes up is stuff that I've generated or that I know that I'm intimately involved with. So like, I really haven't seen, like, if there's been TV shows that featured the Flatwoods Monster, I've probably not seen them. Because if they were recorded before, like I said, I've been doing this for 5 years. Yeah, and before, even though I'd lived in Braxton County for several years, I moved here whenever I was in 6th grade, and then after I graduated high school, I moved out and went to college. But during that whole time, like when I was young, I would hear the name Flatwoods Monster, but I barely knew anything about it. Most of what I know I've learned since getting the job that I have now. And unless it, kind of easily accessible material or it was material that was produced or reported on while I was in this position, then I probably know about it. But otherwise, I probably don't.
Yeah, and if
anybody could turn me on to any stuff
I will,
that,
definitely.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I will for sure. I know I'm not sure. I can't, because I'm having one of those memory moments. I cannot remember who put together the YouTube video, but they actually walked up to like the actual fence. And this may have been some interviews that I think that were done quite a few years ago, a few being more than 5, I think maybe. I don't know how accurate I am in this, but as I said, they walked, pretty much in the footsteps of everything that took place. They went to the spot where obviously the tree is no longer there. But I guess a piece of the fence, post and some of the stuff that was there in the day was there in the video. And if I remember right, they talked to 1 or 2 people who were willing to speak about this. And I don't know that it was any of the May family itself, but I think there were some other people who were loosely connected or interviewed at the time. Because again, there was a lot of, alluding to the fact that other people may have witnessed something or been part of this, and they just kept very quiet about it over the years until it kind of became a popular thing, much later.
Well, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that tree no longer standing there, and I've heard other people say that before, and that it is right that the tree is dead.
Right.
But there's actually the is actually still there. There's about 15 feet of it.
Right, the branch.
So
right.
that is unless I wasn't told the exact right spot.
Were you? Let me ask you this.
But I was told.
Were you? I hate to interrupt again. Were you a part of any kind of tour? Because I am now remembering that there was a person who was conducting a tour, and there were people with him when they were filming, going to the locations. That's what it was. They were like filming a tour that was existing. That's what it was.
You know what that makes me think you saw? Yeah, at some point while I was rambling, I thought I heard some sort of like click that made me worried, but I just kept talking until my phone beat that.
All right. Or lost it, yeah.
So take 2.
No problem.
Right.
But yeah, but I'll tell you what that makes me think of when you're talking about a tour.
Right.
And that is, I know at one time, it may have been really early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe like middle 2000, before the teens, when Frank Ficino visited Flatwoods.
Yep.
For like a Flatwoods Monster event, and he gave tours but it was just like one day, and I think it only happened once and it never happened again. So that would make sense to me, but that might not that might not be the only instance of that happening, but that's what that makes me think of.
Right, and I think that's what it was. Now that you mentioned the name, so, but it was still informative. But like I said, there were a lot of, I think, he talked about again that authorities and National Guard, finding disclosure stuff. I think after the fact, again that there had been possibly anomalous lights spotted in the area previous to or just before, that type of stuff. That's what I was kind of alluding to, I guess, on my end. But, again, I wanted to come here with all those memories on target, and I apologize. It's been a hectic day, so, but you're the guest, and you know the facts, so that's why we have you on.
That's right.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to give myself that much credit, but you know what, though, seeing lights in the sky, that would precede, the monster. There's something about that, though, that rings with some of the other eyewitness stories that I've heard that, relate to the monster, but that aren't, the famous story that happened on September 12th. Stories that precede it and the story that happened afterward.
Right.
It would kind of make sense to, that kind of goes into, those stories that I've heard. But like I said, I don't know anything, conclusively when it comes to those.
No, and that's fine. Like I said, I think with something that happens the way that this did and being so many years later, and of course, obviously some of the witnesses who are still alive not really wanting to, I guess, continue or to keep, being interviewed or badgered. I don't know which word to use there. It's hard to put pieces to the puzzle, but I still looking at, some of the stuff that's out there on it, webpage information, some Facebook stuff people have. And again, that video I've seen, it's still, don't sell yourself short down there. It still fascinates the hell out of me. I mean, I don't know what I would do as a kid had I seen that. And I think that's part of the story too, is that, those people, as told by others, very believable accounts. But then, of course, you had naysayers years later. But I don't know. Yeah, I think listening to the original accounts, I'm pretty sure they saw something.
Well, the fact that you had Mrs. May, the boy's mother, and then some friends, and I mean, it was witnessed by multiple people, individuals, and
they weren't looking to gain anything off of this, so that's what I said. It's one of those things where they weren't looking for overnight fame.
Right. And this is back then. This is before the hype of all the paranormal TV shows.
Oh, yeah, way before.
I mean, this is, like you say, way out in the middle of, this Flatwoods area, I mean, some boys playing football, and I mean, it's, absolutely. There's nothing to gain here.
Andrew, can you speak to the fact that it seemed like witness descriptions seem to be a little varied, and how that's come into play?
Well, what's interesting is the witness. If you take all the witness accounts that I've seen given, at the time, and especially eyewitness drawings, to me they're incredibly in sync. Like if you look at them across the board, especially given the knowledge that they were taken separately, the accounts were taken separately, they really all look pretty cohesive. It seems like the incohesiveness in it starts later, when maybe people are retelling their stories, maybe in the 80s and 90s, that sort of thing. Like to me, something that I find really interesting is that, Kathleen May, sat down with an artist in 52, and they drew what's, essentially now become the iconic, vision of what the monster looks like.
Right.
And I would think that if the artist put a whole bunch of his own, details into it, that by the time it got done, she would, straight up refute, say, this isn't what I saw. But she seemed to acknowledge that that's more or less what she saw. She posed for several pictures, holding the drawing. But then later, now whenever, Freddie is interviewed about it, he talks about, what he saw being this kind of mechanical thing. Still not really being able to explain what it is, but, seemingly they saw the same thing. And so I don't know. There's part of me that really wants to stick with the original accounts that were given in the 50s. But that might just be because that's what I prefer. It's probably my own bias. Like, I like it. I like the notion of something that happened in the 50s being totally 50s sci-fi and looking 50s sci-fi. That fits my aesthetic and
right.
But
I get what you're going for there. I absolutely feel that way too. It's kind of right in that genre without meaning to be, but it is. It fits right into, all the movies and the things that were, hitting America at the time about, space invaders but again, reading the account and the interview, with these individuals, I guess I'm kind of going along with the thing too, that maybe was it a spacesuit or, that was, if it was truly an alien. I'm not saying it was because we obviously don't know, but was it a spacesuit or maybe this was a drone, like some sort of robot thing too? Just from the red eyes and the collar piece that seemed to be behind the head and floating, type of deal.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems pretty open-ended.
Right.
Honestly, the whole thing, because when that's another thing too. I mean, when you have people witnessing something that they can't explain at all, and coming from a background that was also pretty unexposed to a lot of things, even though in the 50s, I don't know exactly what year they would have been, but 50s is when sci-fi movies started.
Right.
I don't really know that would have affected anything here, to be honest with you, because I remember, while Seth was making his documentary, for Small Town Monsters, I talked to Freddie and asked if he would happen to have any family pictures from around that time, and he said that he didn't. He said the oldest pictures that he would have had would probably be sometime in the mid-'60s, because that would have been the first time they owned a camera.
Right.
So, if that was the first time they owned a camera,
so
I kind of doubt.
Wasn't that accessible to the community, like those movies and
TV because they were out and about.
Right.
And TV obviously was still new in its infancy and things. But and again, and Andrew's making a good point that I think too, with any exposure that we probably could throw at people now, that really wasn't, it didn't exist at that level then. And like you said, even being that's like this sci-fi genre feel to it, I don't know, man. Again, the description, it's just so totally different from all the other stuff that seems to be reported, except when there were closer encounters that started to happen much later. Then some of the similarities kick in. But even though this story wasn't, it was huge, but it wasn't one of those that, I'm trying to put this a nice way, that it didn't skip over certain generations, so that when there were other encounters, even those were vastly different. There weren't certain similarities, I guess, is what I'm trying to point out here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Andrew. Have there been, as far as you're aware, have there been other similar encounters in anywhere else in the United States? I mean, have there been similar eyewitness encounters of these, I guess, quote-unquote aliens?
Not as far as I know, at least. Right, that's what I was going to say. At least as far as the way that the way that I know that the monster, the Flatwoods monster, has been described, really the closest thing that I would think I could probably put my finger on would probably be Mothman. And the only reason why I say that is because the encounters with yes, but and also the encounter with the Flatwoods monster was so brief. And, who knows what it was, who knows whatever they saw was capable of. So it's kind of hard to tell, but that always seemed to me to be the closest fit. And I know that funny enough, amongst skeptics, Joe Nickel, being the one that comes to mind, first.
Right.
There's, most skeptics kind of lump the two together. They kind of feel like they're probably the same misinterpreted natural phenomena or what have
Swamp
you.
gas.
Right. Right.
Well,
it has huge
well,
eyes.
maybe
And,
so,
yeah,
but there's-
come on. Yeah. Okay.
The funny thing is, there's no swamps here.
Right.
I don't know of one swamp in Braxton County. Definitely not on the hills of Flatwoods.
Right.
It'd be pretty dry up there.
Now, with this, I guess with this phenomena or this sighting, is there anything cryptic about it? Were there any, with the witnesses involved, the children or Mrs. May? Were there any illnesses that they had fallen to?
That's a good question. I was just going to ask that. Yeah.
Curses or bad luck or anything that might have been associated with the eyewitnesses of this creature.
Well, the only thing I'd ever heard when it came to illnesses and that sort of thing was that some of the witnesses, falling ill, during and right after the encounter, maybe lasting, a couple days up to maybe a week or two.
Wow.
But I'd never heard of anything necessarily long-lasting.
Right.
Other than the only thing I can think of is the few of the witnesses that I know that have, passed away or been in poor health. I think that if memory serves, I think they may have all developed cancer.
Yeah, there's that radiation
but again,
there.
it could be. But the only thing too is, on top of that, is they were all older. When they got, I know the cancer isn't necessarily a
lot of older people develop it.
Well,
later
and
years.
we have to, and I think you look into see if they're all smokers too,
The
because
living back
that
then,
was a
the
big
way
thing
it was
back then.
back
Just
then,
smoke.
absolutely.
So, yeah,
Um,
there's.
Yeah, well, I know. I don't know about. I don't know about all. I don't know that any of them had like lung cancer or anything like. Because
Right.
I'm almost positive that none of the witnesses that I'm aware of smoked.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Which is
Yeah,
now
especially
that I
back
think
then.
about it.
And
Yeah,
part
so
of the
that
country,
that changes that dynamic right there immediately. Wow.
But that's just as far as I know. I'm not. That's actually an aspect of it that I've not thought about that hard.
Right.
Andrew, and like the Mothman was prophetic in a way that, excuse me, you had the collapse of the bridge there in Point Pleasant.
Yeah.
Was there anything that happened as far as in Braxton County, like any tragedy or anything that might have happened shortly thereafter the encounter? That may have
That's
been
interesting
related
too.
to-
I don't know that I've ever thought of that. If there was anything that happened after, I don't think it would have been. I would think it would. If anything bad had happened afterwards, it wouldn't have been big enough that it became war or anything
Right.
like that.
Right.
Because something like the collapse of the Silver Bridge, where what was it, 40-some, 50-some people died.
Yeah.
That
right.
changes
That's
a
big.
for generations.
Right.
And there's nothing that I can think of that's on that scale that's happened. Probably the biggest thing that changed our community that happened in the years to come were both of our big lakes were dammed.
Uh-huh.
And the interstate came through. But nothing tragic. But I tell you what, both those things did completely change the way of life in this county.
Oh,
funny
sure.
enough.
Sure.
But I don't know if to me, I've never put that together, and I'm probably I'm to be honest with you.
Well, and like you had mentioned about the similarities to that of the Mothman, what if indeed, they are in fact the same creature, but it's just in 1952, versus, what was it, 67 for the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, or 68?
I was going to say mid-late 60s sounds right to me.
Right, because there are similarities there.
1960. Bob, it's 1966.
66.
November 17th, 1966.
See, that's the Mothman authoritarian right there. That's why we have you on the show,
Okay.
Elmer, to keep us in check.
Yeah.
But, you know, because, I mean, how far are you guys away from, like, Point Pleasant, West Virginia? How far away is Braxton County?
Well, I am
You guys both
probably, I would say at least maybe a 2-hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah, you
from
are.
Point
You're
Pleasant.
2 hours away from me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the way the crow flies, you know, it's probably about half that distance. But driving-wise, you kind of have to drive south real far and then drive, I think, east or west. Actually, now off the top of my head, I'm not sure what. But you have to drive a big L. Yeah.
Elmer, do you see any connections between the Mothman and the Flatwoods monster? I mean,
You know, really, the only connections I can think of is UFO activity during that time. The creatures are totally different to me. You know, one had wings, one didn't have wings, that it floated. I mean, the red eyes, yeah, I can see that. You know, like the witnesses for the Braxton County monster, that, you know, to me it sounds like it's more mechanical.
Yep.
And Andrew, have you ever heard Stanton Friedman's theory on it?
You know, I don't think I have. I didn't know Stan Freeman ever talked about the Flatwoods monster.
Yeah, he was on the show one time. I asked him about it, and he had actually came out to Braxton County in the 70s
Okay.
to do some little investigations. And his theory was it was like a biosuit.
Oh, yeah.
And because he said that his theory was that it was like a biosuit. The alien came down in, you know, was taking, you know, specimens or whatever and just shot off. Because of some of the reports, if I remember correctly, that old Spadehead just shot off up in his face right after being seen. So it kind of made sense to me that it was more like that. It could have been something inside of it.
Like a scout. Like
I
the
mean,
scouting.
almost sounds like
I
the beginning to the movie E.T. Remember at the beginning when they're getting specimens, they landed on Earth.
I think it had a lot more to do with, you know, the time too, because of the simple fact of the 1950s. You know, you did have a lot of UFO activity. You did have, you know, the sci-fi boom that was, you know, it's like one of my favorite things in the whole wide world is old black and white sci-fi movies with really crappy UFOs flying on shoestrings and everything else. But, but, you know, it's one of those things, it's like, you know, in the 60s, it kind of died down. You know, you already, in the 60s, you had some a little bit more prominent encounters UFO-wise because, you know, you had the Mothman sightings, aka Andrew Cold. You had the Betty and Barney Hill cases. You had, you know, you also had the Kecksburg crash. You know, all these different things that was going on in the 60s, but nobody really, you know, like sci-fi movies were just kind of like pushed to the wayside after the 50s. But
well, I know.
You know, the Braxton County monster. You know, me and Andrew's always talked about me coming out there and checking things out, and I was almost there, Andrew. I was almost there. I was on the back side of Sutton a few months ago, and I was almost there, man. I was almost on your doorstep, but I was with the electric company, but, you know, we had to go back the other way and head back towards Beckley and all that stuff. But I was almost there, man. Don't worry. I'll get there sooner or later.
Elmer, about what part of the state do you live? If you don't mind asking.
Well, basically, you might as well say I'm right beside Point Pleasant.
Okay.
See, I'm the one that does, like, the bus tours during the Mothman Festival.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. I was at Mothman last year. I don't know if you have seen me or not, but I was wearing our Flatwood Monster mascot costume and taking pictures with people.
That's awesome.
Now, see, I was getting ready to ask you that. I know you all had the museum over there, and nobody ever brings up the big, giant Braxton County monster chair. I freaking love that chair.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I was just looking at a picture of that.
We bring it up. That was actually that was our doing. We started that project in 2015. But there's 5 of them. There's not just one.
Wow.
There's 5 of them?
Well, are they? Because they're at the
and they're all 10 feet tall.
Yeah, I was going to say that 10 feet tall. And you can go to different. Just type in Braxton County Monster, or you can do the Flatwoods Monster, and there's all kinds of information there. Of course, you see information on Andrew, and as well as the Flatwoods Monsters, and there's looks like it's a part of the Braxton County Visitors Center or Bureau. There's some information that's got pictures, little looks like lanterns or idols of the Braxton County Monster or the Flatwoods Monster, and it looks like basically it's the same little knickknack that you guys have produced ever since the 1950s. It's kind of cool.
Well, if you go to our website, which is braxtonwv.org/monster, that kind of takes you on the beginning of kind of the journey of the Flatwoods Monster, especially as far as we're concerned. That's our website, and we have a whole lot of content on there. But that in that area of our website, that'll tell you about the Monster Chairs project. We started that in 2015. Right. And I believe the one was built and placed at the beginning of 2016. And that's, it's funny that you mentioned, Elmer, that there's a monster chair singular, is whenever we first started building them, we built one and placed it, and it took a little while before we found more, because the idea all along was to build several of them. But we built and placed the first one, and it took us a little while to come up with another location to put it. And meanwhile, we actually got a decent amount of press for our project, but the only thing that could ever cite was the one chair, because that's all there was. So then we proceeded to make 4 more and spread them around, and they got considerably less attention after that. Yeah, there are 5 total, and they're kind of peppered all around Braxton County. We would like to even do more and expand on it more, but right now we just don't have any place to put them. But each one is, and we even have like a thing going now that's kind of like a fun little adventure, tour, and that's if you visit all of them and take a picture at each one of them. You can come into our office or a couple other locations, show somebody, all the pictures that you took, and we'll give you and any member and all the members of your party that's with you, like this sticker the only way you can get it is if you take that, what we call the Free Braxy Challenge. And if you go on our website, we have a section that's called, it's braxtonwv.org/Braxy. Which is BRAXXIE. And that spells it out. And what it is, the narrative of it, it's just to be like a fun thing, particularly like a fun thing maybe you can do with kids, and that sort of thing. But most of the people that came into my office have not been kids. It's
right,
I'm
sure, adults.
It's been people my age.
Like us.
But that's cool too. I love it.
You're speaking about all these.
If I wasn't doing it, if I wasn't putting it on, I would be doing it myself.
Right.
But the idea is you go around and you're taking pictures of the monster in order to prove its existence, because the men in black are trying to wipe the memory of the monster from the people, so that it'll be forgotten. That we designed.
Oh, there you guys. You guys there? Hello?
Hello?
Oh,
yeah, we lost you for just a half a second. I'm sorry.
Okay. You lost me or lost somebody else?
Lost both you guys, because it's the Skype.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
It's the
Men in Black.
The Men in Black. The Men in Black, they're tapping us. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about all these great products, Andrew. I'm thinking, man, we need to have one of those lamps for our studio.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Okay.
And a T-shirt. How do we? Are they on your webpage? Can we order all that stuff?
Yeah.
On your
It's all
webpage?
here. It's on BraxtonWV.org.
Yeah. See, he's got a thing over there. Look, I have nothing over here. I'm staring at a wall.
Now, Andrew, are the lanterns still homemade still, or they send them off now?
No, they're still made. They're still made the same way that they've been made.
Ceramic.
Since they've been in production since the late '60s, and they're still made the same way. They're still made by the same woman, actually.
Wow, that's
they're not made here though.
Right.
Yeah, they're not made here though. They're made in Marietta, Ohio.
Okay.
There was a ceramicist that I guess they found. I guess they couldn't find anybody closer to make them, and she slip casts every one of them, fires every one of them, and paints every one of them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we got to get one of those.
A lot of work goes.
We need one of those.
Sure, definitely.
I gotta tell you this story. It's kind of odd. See, my grandma got me into the paranormal stuff, and well, it's funny. Well, she actually had one of the lanterns at her house whenever I was a kid, and I was just like obsessed with it because it's like when you're a kid, you hear these stories, folklore of Braxton County Monster, Mothman, but I was more into Braxton County Monster when I was growing up because it just seemed more realistic than Mothman. You know what I mean? Which is odd now because the simple fact of what I do, but I just remember sitting there on top of her mantle and just staring at it and just thinking to myself, I wonder if that thing's outside right now. You know what I mean?
Well, at first when you look at it,
really funny.
And you're a kid, you're probably wondering, okay, what the hell is that thing, and until you really know the story.
Yeah, it's pretty odd looking.
But it's awesome.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of funny. You talk about being a kid. I've got a 2.5-year-old daughter.
Right.
And, I've been doing this job for 5 years, and we've been doing monster-heavy stuff for, about 3 years, so longer than she's been alive. And so her whole life, she's seen the monsters. She comes visit me at work. I wear my monster T-shirts around.
Kid, yeah.
That sort of stuff. So she's all about it. And the other day, I was actually visiting my mom in Flatwoods. I just live a town over. But my mom lives in Flatwoods, and my stepdad had recently bought a Jeep, and he was taking it back into the woods behind his house, and wanted to take he and I for a ride, as well as my daughter and my sister's daughter, my niece, and they're both around 2 or 3.
Right.
So we're driving through the woods, and as we're driving, my kid starts telling my niece, "Look over there. Look, there's a monster. Look over there. There might be another monster over there." So I turn around and I say, "Maddie, are you trying to find the Flatwoods monster?" And she says, "Yeah." So, she's all about it, and she's 2.
Right. Well, the apples don't fall far from the tree, that's for sure, man. You got a monster kid on your hands there. Eventually take the reins over from her pop someday.
That sounds good.
Braxton County Monster, the Flatwoods Monster. Did anybody witness that he had been wearing an infinity gauntlet by chance?
No, he does not have an infinity gauntlet. There's only one person in West Virginia has that infinity gauntlet.
Yeah,
that's me.
you need to post that up on Facebook, man. Elmer's got it.
Spoiler, you're going to turn us all to ash and kill us? Oh, spoiler.
Just like a snap of the finger, the show ends.
That's right. So on those notes, Elmer,
keep your eyes to the skies.
And happy haunting. We'll see you next time, guys.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to I Want to Believe Talk Radio.
Yep, thanks
on
for
the
joining us.
Paranormal Now Network, powered by Liveradio1.
And listen to
9.9.
Have a good night, guys.
You've been listening to I Want to Believe Radio, right here on Live Radio 1, the Paranormal Now Network, at WKDS 89.9 FM Kalamazoo.